Morning, YouTube. Hope everybody is doing well. So, photo shoot is now done. I didn't film because it was an amazing day, but it was a bit of a hectic day. I had 3 girls that were doing it, which they looked absolutely incredible, absolutely smashed their photo shoot preps. Can't wait to see the photos. I also popped in. I also hopped in and obviously did the photo shoot. Initially, I wasn't planning on doing it. I had another lady, but due to certain circumstances, she couldn't do it. And when you buy photo shoots, you buy them as a group. They're almost like you get like a reduced price to do them. So I was like, do you know what? I'm going to hop in, which was why my fat loss phase was kind of a short, sharp 5 weeks. And my starting point before, obviously, I went into that, I'd been maintaining since Christmas. And I've been maintaining a relatively comfortable body composition, which meant that, you know, I didn't really need to diet for too long to essentially bring the look that I wanted to bring to the photo shoot. So photo shoot is done. I will insert some clips just so we'll have some photos so you can just see the day. We obviously haven't had the edits and stuff back, but this YouTube is going to be all essentially about kind of like reverse dieting, okay? Because I often think that there isn't potentially enough focus on this. We often put focus on dieting, okay, or fat loss phases, but learning to essentially reverse diet or, you know, move into a phase where you're no longer looking to drop body fat anymore. But for a lot of people, they're ultimately not looking to kind of go backwards. And, you know, and I've definitely got experience with this now, both myself and my clients, but I know at the start of my journey, this was something that I did worry about. You know, I've definitely been somebody that's lost weight and regained it all, okay? And that's never a nice feeling. And I've also been somebody that's feared kind of like, okay, so I'm going to eat more food. Does that mean that I'm just going to start regaining the weight that I've essentially worked really hard to lose? So this is essentially what this YouTube is going to be all about today, guys. Obviously, if you're new here, then I'm Amy. I'm an online health and fitness coach, qualified nutritionist, and I specialize in just helping females to feel healthy, to feel strong, to feel confident in their body. And I like to take ladies through, I call it like the 3-step approach, because I feel like if you want to build your forever body, I do believe that you need to go through not just a fat loss phase, okay? I believe that your journey is multiple phases, including losing how to drop body fat, learning how to maintain your results, and also taking yourself through a building phase, okay? And I think it's really important that actually we do all of these things. We're not just people that work on ourselves when we want to diet, but also we're going to get to a point where we're just going to want to live in our forever body, right? We're just going to want to live healthy. We're going to want to feel strong. So we need to also learn essentially how to do that. So reverse dieting, okay, essentially is where you are looking to increase your calories. So I no longer want to obviously be in a deficit anymore. So initially coming out of this, I have increased my food. Now, depending on the goal will depend on kind of the direction you take it. Because if some people have ran a fat loss phase and they now just want to move into maintenance, okay, then it's going to look slightly different in comparison to somebody that maybe has got really lean, okay, maybe you've done a bodybuilding prep, or maybe you've done like a photo shoot style prep where you have got super lean and you want to maybe move into a build phase, okay, because they are going to be slightly different, okay? If you're moving into a build phase, then you are going to reverse your calories out, but then you are going to move into potentially a phase where food is going to sit slightly higher than maybe your maintenance, okay? Because we know that in order to build muscle, you are going to build at a quicker rate, okay, if your food doesn't need to be a big surplus, okay, but just potentially ever so slightly over your maintenance. Whereas if you're somebody that maybe has done a fat loss phase, okay, and you want to just maintain your body composition, okay, then it's going to look slightly different. Okay, you will essentially establish where your maintenance is. Okay, so you'll increase your food to maintenance level, and then you will kind of stay there. So initially what I've essentially done with mine is increased by about 500 calories. Okay, so initially increased my food. I made a couple of changes to the types of foods that I'm eating, and I've put a really, really big focus on making sure that my food is very, very high in nutrients. Okay, after something like a fat loss phase where you maybe have been on less food, okay, you may find that you haven't been able to get as much nutrients into your diet. So a big focus after a fat loss phase is nourishment. Okay, your body's also going to respond so much better to those sorts of foods. Now, this isn't saying that we can't have non-nutrient dense foods within our diet, okay, because we absolutely can, but we want to look at that ratio. Okay, so we want 80 to 90% of our diet coming from high nutrients dense foods, getting an array of nutrients within your diet, and then we can have that sprinkle of stuff. So I've initially increased my calories by about 500. Okay, I'm still having 5 meals a day, which is what I was doing before. I'm still eating similar foods. There's a couple of tweaks which I'll explain today. But I'm still eating very similar foods. And this is often sometimes where a lot of people go wrong, is that they have this like diet food and then their diet is completely different when they're in other phases. Okay, the main thing that we want to look at is increasing our calories, getting more nutrients into the body. So initially done that. I also think the second thing is that you need structure. Okay, so during a fat loss phase, we have structure, right? We track our food, we potentially follow a meal plan. Okay, our food, you know, we do all of those things. Okay, suddenly you don't just want to then move into a phase and stop doing those things, especially if you're relatively new to this. I really would encourage you to continue to track your food. Okay, you'll be surprised. You start having bits and bobs, you start not weighing things. All of a sudden, what you might find without even necessarily realizing is you're now eating a lot more calories than what you thought before. Okay, so that is essentially the two things that I have done. I've initially increased my calories. I've put a big focus on nutrients because I know that my body's going to need it, and also our bodies metabolize and digest nutrient dense foods a lot better, so we want, you know, that ratio to come from that. And I'm still having structure, so I'm still following a meal plan, I'm still tracking my food. Okay, be surprised doing it like this, so treating your reverse diet or moving into another phase, okay, with the same level of structure and the same level of adherence, you'll be surprised that actually you can get your food quite high quite quickly. I found that with myself. I found that with clients who've come out the other side and still had structure. So I've done a bit of work this morning. I'm just going to go down and make my pre now. It is Tuesday. I'm now doing my upper session on a Tuesday. And I'll talk through my training a bit later on, because obviously my training, it has changed, because I think before I was in a maintenance phase, right? I was quite happy with where my body was at. But I think the reality of what it was is that I'd spent so long cutting, bulking, that I just wanted to sit at a level of body composition, i.e. body fat, that I was happy with. Okay, and I did that, and I maintained that between January and May. I then dropped into my little January and April. I then dropped into my little mini cut for 5 weeks for the photoshoot prep. Got a little bit leaner. I think I dropped about 4.5 kilos in that 5 weeks. It was short and sharp, but I knew it wasn't going to be very long. And I don't tend to find that I struggle with dieting, because I spend so much of the year not dieting. And I think that's another thing. You know, if you're always dieting all of the time, then you'll probably find that your adherence sometimes is harder. Whereas we should get to a place where actually we spend the majority of the year not dieting, the majority of the year feeling good, feeling strong, feeling healthy, and then maybe we have those sprinkles of fat loss phases. Obviously, at the start of your journey, you may have to do some hard diets, you know, to initially get yourself to that point. But then once you've done that, you want to be road mapping time either at maintenance or time in a build phase. So gonna go down and have my breakfast now. Just been doing some work this morning. Got my coffee, got my cup from a client who got me this for for Christmas. Definitely can't count reps. That's why I film myself half the time. So yeah, done a little bit of work. Gonna go and have my pre. I'll show you what I'm having. I talked through my training today, and like I said, this is just going to be about sort of, reverse dieting, how to do it, what the mindset shift needs to be as well. I think that's super important, because there does have to be a mindset shift, especially if you're moving into potentially a build phase, and potentially you are going to be coming away from not seeing yourself as lean, and that can be really, really hard. I've definitely been there, and even to this point now, I probably still have that little inner voice of like, oh my God, you're just going to gain weight, and that weight's never going to come back off. So yeah, let's go and get the breakfast ready, and I can talk you through that. Right, meal one, training day. I do normally train earlier, but I had some work that I needed to get done this morning, so I've just done it backwards. Normally I go train early and then come back and start work, but there was some stuff that I needed to cater to client-wise. So just having my breakfast. So on a training day, because I train early, obviously I'm not going to have the digestion. I'm not going to want to sit down and have a big meal and have time to digest it. So I just opt for something easy. So I've got cream of rice, which is like rice powder with a bit of a sweetener in it. I've got my salted caramel whey, and then I've got some raspberries and then a little bit of almond butter on top. And then I do also add in now some milk powder. I wasn't really getting much calcium. Calcium is actually really important, and helps with muscle contraction. So I do add a little bit of milk powder, and this is pretty easy to digest. If I'm training at 6:30 in the morning, I will just actually put this into a shake, have the fruit on the side, but I just have it into a shake and drink it. Whereas I've got a little bit of time to obviously sit and eat this meal, and essentially let it digest. So that is my first meal. I've got upper, which is basically just shoulders now. Like I said, we don't want to grow the back anymore, so the focus is just the shoulders, and I talk about training and updates with regards to that. And like I said earlier, my food is essentially, I'm still tracking my food, I'm still weighing my food. I've just increased my portion sizes. Protein has pretty much stayed the same, but there's just been an increase in carbohydrates and an increase in fats. Depending on where you are will depend on your increase. So like I said earlier, if you're somebody that's got really, really lean, let's just say that you've done a bodybuilding show or you've done a photo shoot prep and you've got really, really lean, when you initially come out, you may actually need to regain a little bit of body fat to allow yourself to, restore your hormones and for your body to feel hormonally, functional and stable. Obviously, I didn't get stage lean for this photo shoot, so I don't essentially need to go straight into a phase where I am looking to actually gain some body fat. So initially, we've just moved my food up to maintenance, and actually my weight has only really gone up by, I think, like on average 0.2, 0.3. Naturally your weight potentially will increase when you increase your food, and that sometimes can be just a little bit of a worrying thing, because I think especially for females we can just instantly think that, oh my god, I'm just going to gain weight. But the easiest way to think about it is that if you're eating more food, you're going to have more food sitting in your stomach. We also know that more carbohydrates will pour more water in, so you initially might see an increase on the scales. But then if you stayed on that sort of food, if you'd worked it out to be more like maintenance, then you probably would see a flat line. Obviously, if you're in a phase where you actually need your scale weight to go up, you need to regain body fat, then you would need to make sure that your food had increased to an amount where we then were seeing that rate of gain. Whereas I'm not necessarily looking to do that straight away. So that 500 increase has probably just taken me up to my maintenance, okay? And that's probably where I'll be for a couple of weeks, until I move into an improvement phase, which obviously I'll talk about later. So gonna have this meal now and then go and train. It's only shoulders, so it won't take me very long. I'm not gonna film that, and then we can come back, have my post-workout, and I can talk more about my training, what I'm gonna be doing, and then also some of the things around the mental shift that you need when it comes to reverse dieting. Session complete. Got a nice little cheeky shoulder pump. I do love a cheeky shoulder pump. It was a good session. What did I do? I had machine lateral raises. I had rear delt flies. I had cuff lateral raises, front raises, face pulls, and abs. So there's no sort of like direct pressing that I'm essentially doing now. We just want to focus on sort of like the side of the shoulders and the back of the shoulders. Training wise, so obviously before Christmas I was like, oh, I don't necessarily want to get any bigger, but I think when I think about it, I just wanted to sit at a body composition that I was happy with. And like, I really like physique development. Like, it's something that I've done for years. It's essentially how I've built my body, and I love doing it. So I am going to still continue to do that. But now that I'm not necessarily striving from a competitive side of things, I can be a little bit more selective in the areas that I want to grow. So the training is more of a focus on upper glutes, quads, because I just love a pair of well-developed quads, adductors, because I didn't really have any direct adductor work in there, and then side of the shoulders and back of the shoulders. So, and you do find that as you get further into your journey, like when I first started, I just needed muscle everywhere. Like, I just didn't have any muscle. Whereas as you get further through your journey, you probably will find that your training becomes a little bit more specific to you in the areas that maybe you need to bring up. Like, my glute max is quite strong, but my glute med, so that upper shelf, could do with a little bit more sort of development. So that's essentially what we're doing. So 3 leg days, 1 kind of like shoulder and rear delt day, and then I've got a bit of core and a bit of rotational stuff, because I'm very, it's funny, with bodybuilding, we tend to move in this plane. So we find that we get quite stiff, rotating from side to side. And it's good to functionally be able to do that. So I've got a little bit of that in. So that's the plan with training over the next few weeks. Back to the conversation of obviously what this YouTube is all about, which is the reverse. So like I said, when you come out of a fat loss phase, okay, depending on what your, what's the word I'm looking for? Depending on whether you're looking to reverse out and just maintain, or whether you're looking to reverse out because you need to regain some body fat, or maybe you're looking to build, then that will determine normally around sort of 300 to 500 calorie increase from maybe where you were is normally what I would recommend and what I've tended to do. So gone with a 500 increase. Like I said, my weight's gone up a little bit. And then what I would do with that is I would monitor a few things. So I would always recommend that you weigh daily and take an average, just because our scale weight will fluctuate for so many reasons. Training, inflammation, sleep, stress, time of the month, salt intake. If you go out for a meal, you might find that your scale weight sits up the next day, not because you've directly gained body fat. So sometimes weighing every day and taking an average can give you a more sort of accurate representation to like whether you've increased, stayed the same. I know some people can be reactive to the scales. Like, I do have some clients that they are very reactive, so we don't weigh daily. So I think it is about working with you. Scale weight fluctuations don't really bother me because I understand it. Like, I understand that I might weigh a little bit more after a leg day, or if I've had a shit night's sleep, my scale weight might sit slightly higher. I literally just take the reading, put it in the box, and then I leave it. So I would monitor a few things. Once you've initially moved your food up,
and you still want to have structure, so you still want to track your food like you were when you were dieting, I would monitor essentially how you feel, okay, because that's really important. Energy, you should notice an increase in maybe your energy levels. Take an average and maybe look at the average over maybe 2 weeks, because initially, like I said, you may find that your scale weight increases, but then in the second week you might find that it actually maintains, and that's just simply because you're eating more food. So I personally normally would increase food, wait a couple of weeks, and then have a little look at that average. And then depending on what you're looking to do, obviously if you're looking to go into a building phase, then obviously that average scale weight is going to come up. Whereas if you're looking to reverse diet and you want to sort of maintain, then that's kind of what you would want to see over sort of a 2, 3, 4 week period. Maybe an initial rise in the scales, but then it should roughly stay the same. In a nutshell, that is what you want to do. I think where a lot of people go wrong is I think that they either finish the diet phase and they don't have a plan. So it's like, oh, I'm not dieting anymore. They don't continue with a lot of the things that they were doing before. Not being on lower food, because that's not the objective, but they stop tracking their food. They start having extras. And there's other things that maybe you were doing, like you were maybe doing a set amount of training, maybe you were doing a set amount of steps, maybe you had to do some cardio in your fat loss phase, and then you suddenly stopped doing those things. So you still want to have a target with those. You want to track your food, bring your food up initially, but then you still want to have a bit of a target with your steps and with your cardio. And you'll probably find that you'll bring it to a manageable amount. So during that fat loss phase, I wasn't doing any cardio. When I've done previous diets before and I've done cardio, then maybe what I would have done was sort of brought the cardio down, not just completely cut it all out. So you still want to have an element of movement in there, but maybe it's about establishing what's more of a manageable, more sustainable amount. Maybe you were doing more steps in your fat loss phase, and now you want to sort of bridge the gap between what feels sustainable. I think the second thing is like having a goal next. Sometimes if you've had a goal of fat loss and you've worked really, really hard, and then you don't have another goal to move on to, I think sometimes you can feel a little bit lost, which is why I will always have a goal. So, I've just done that diet for the photo shoot. I'm now reversing into what we call kind of an improvement phase, where the goal now is to focus on building muscle. And I think that massively helps. So yeah, that's kind of how you nail the reverse. You still need an element of structure. I think some of the struggles as well that you might experience is sometimes when you initially start to eat more food, your hunger signals can kick in, okay? We've got two hormones, leptin and ghrelin, which can kind of control signals to tell the brain they're hungry and signals to tell the brain they're full. Now, when we diet, they can kind of flip the other way around, which is often why sometimes you might find that you don't feel particularly full and you feel sort of hungry. When you start to eat more, it can sometimes... you can just essentially get more food noise, okay? Because your body's going to be in that state where it's probably going to want you to eat, and that essentially can be hard. So I think it's about understanding that when you move into that phase. Things that you can do is make sure that your meals have got a solid amount of protein, a solid amount of fibre, build your plate so that you've got quite a lot of volume. I find having rough meal timings on my meals is also helpful, so I can just kind of be like, well, actually sort of every 3 hours I'm having a meal anyway. I just need to kind of like stay strong in that gap, but that definitely can be something. And also you'll have food noise because when you diet, there's a constraint, right? You know that you need to stick to this plan, and as a byproduct of that, you're going to lose body. Now, that's no longer the goal, right? So you can have this kind of like internal battle, I suppose, of like, well, I don't need to, be on a certain amount of calories. I don't need to do that. Like, I've definitely had that in my journey. And that in itself can be really, really hard. So I find having a meal plan, getting my food up, having rough meal timings, and then just maybe factoring in like, once a week factoring in an off-plan meal or a treat or something that you can essentially look forward to. It's a meal that you don't necessarily have to track and have to weigh, and I find that kind of setup works well for me. And I think if you can kind of get through sort of the first sort of 2-3 weeks of having that little bit of a food noise, having that little bit of hunger, things do settle. I think the other struggles that people face is that the fear that they're just going to regain that weight back. You know, if you've just worked really, really hard and, you know, you've lost, like some of my photo shoot ladies had lost over 20 kilos, okay, you know, you're definitely going to have this fear that you're just going to regain that. But I think you just have to have trust that if you do this phase with structure, if you potentially invest in having a coach, then the coach is going to guide you. Like I say to all of my girls, like, I'm not going to let you, you know, or I'm not going to set up your plan so that you just regain that body fat back. You know, we will work very closely. We'll have check-ins every week to make sure that that essentially isn't happening. But I definitely think, you know, that was something that I used to fear at the start, or if the scale weight went up a little bit when you were reversing, you would just instantly think, oh my God, I'm just going to go back the other way. You've just got to have trust that with structure, that essentially won't happen. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is essentially the reverse. That's essentially what I've done. I've reversed my calories up, I think somewhere between sort of 300 to 500. Still track your food, you know, put a focus on nourishment, put a focus on getting your nutrients up. Protein will probably stay relatively stable. It will be carbs and fats that will come up, and assess things over sort of a 2 to 3 week period. And you'll be actually surprised if you can kind of nail this reverse phase with structure. From experience with myself and clients, I can always get their food higher quicker without really any changes, other than that they just feel great, they've got more energy, maybe their physique looks a little bit fuller, but in like a good way. So I highly recommend when you do reverse diet, because everybody, you know, you can't diet forever, is having structure with it, and potentially if it's something that you struggle with, then getting support with somebody that understands that process. Is, you know, I've taken clients through multiple reverse phases. I've gone through multiple reverse phases, so I know what it's like. So yeah, I'm going to leave the YouTube here because I wanted it to be about the reverse. Food-wise, I'm going to go and have my post-workout, which is oats, banana, honey, and Greek yogurt. Is so nice. If you like those things, then that combo is absolutely banging. So I'm going to go and have that meal, and I'll probably do a full day of eating at some point, but I wanted this to be about the reverse. I hope that was helpful. And, you know, if you're struggling with a reverse or you want any help, then feel free to, you know, drop me a message and I'd be happy to help.